Gate agent threw black man's passport in trash, then discovered who he really was. Part 1. The Federal Inspector. The morning sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Denver Marriott as Jonathan Hayes carefully folded his pressed white shirts into his garment bag. His movements were precise, methodical, the habits of a man who had learned that perfection was not optional but necessary. At 42 years old, Jonathan had spent the last 8 years as a senior safety inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration, a position that required him to be invisible until the moment he chose not to be. His leather briefcase sat open on the mahogany desk, revealing neatly organized documents bearing government letterhead. A federal identification badge caught the morning light before he tucked it securely into his wallet, alongside his driver's license and platinum credit cards. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with his cologne as he reviewed airline passenger manifests and facility compliance reports on his laptop. His phone buzzed against the glass desktop. "Hayes speaking," he answered in his characteristic professional tone. "Jonathan, it's Sarah from the office," came his assistant's familiar voice. "Confirming your inspection schedule. You're conducting the surprise compliance review at Denver International tonight." Jonathan adjusted his silk tie while cradling the phone against his shoulder. "Correct. Unannounced operational security assessment. I'll be observing passenger processing procedures and staff interactions with particular attention to civil rights compliance." "Perfect. Your federal credentials are updated in the system. I've prepared the incident report templates you requested, plus the new discrimination documentation forms." Through the hotel window, Jonathan could see Denver's skyline stretching toward the Rocky Mountains. His expensive Swiss watch, a promotion gift celebrating his advancement to senior inspector, glinted as he reached for his coffee mug. "Excellent, Sarah. These routine assessments usually proceed without incident. Most airline personnel maintain professional standards when they know federal oversight is possible." "Of course. Safe travels, and remember the new protocol, document everything, especially any differential treatment patterns." Jonathan finished with a slight smile. 8 years of doing this, Sarah. I know the drill better than anyone." After ending the call, Jonathan closed his laptop and straightened his charcoal gray suit jacket. As one of the FAA's most experienced compliance inspectors, he had conducted dozens of surprise reviews at airports nationwide. His job involved ensuring airline personnel followed federal regulations, maintained professional standards, and treated all passengers with equal respect regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The irony never escaped him. As a black man in federal law enforcement, he regularly experienced the very discrimination he was professionally tasked with investigating and preventing. He had learned to navigate 2 worlds simultaneously, the one where his credentials commanded respect, and the one where his skin color invited suspicion. Now, 12 hours later, his real work was beginning. Part 2. Gate C-24. The evening atmosphere at Denver International Airport pulsed with typical energy. Families corralled restless children while elderly couples shared airport snacks. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops while teenagers scrolled through social media. The constant background symphony included rolling luggage wheels, muffled announcements, and distant jet engines. Gate C-24 buzzed with anticipation for the 8:30 departure to Washington, D.C. The seating area held the usual mix of travelers, some reading paperbacks, others charging phones, a few attempting to nap despite the fluorescent lighting. Patricia Reynolds had claimed this territory as her domain for 8 long years. At 45, she had cultivated a reputation among colleagues for being challenging, particularly when dealing with passengers she deemed unworthy of first-class service. Her supervisors occasionally received informal complaints, but nothing had ever escalated to formal investigation. Her discriminatory pattern was methodical and calculated. With white passengers, especially those holding business or first-class tickets, Patricia transformed into the picture of helpful professionalism. Her smile appeared genuine, her voice warm, her assistance eager. But passengers of color faced an entirely different Patricia Reynolds. Excessive document scrutiny became routine. Additional security questions materialized from nowhere. General hostility replaced professional courtesy. She had perfected institutional racism that operated just below the threshold of formal complaints. Multiple security cameras positioned throughout the gate area recorded everything continuously, their footage stored automatically for review during incidents or disputes. Dozens of passengers sat nearby with smartphones readily accessible, a generation instinctively prepared to document significant moments. United Airlines corporate offices occupied floors directly above the gate level. Airport management, customer service supervisors, and federal compliance liaisons worked within elevator distance. This proximity should have deterred misconduct, but Patricia had grown comfortable in her routine of unchecked bias. Federal aviation regulations couldn't have been clearer. Airline personnel were explicitly required to treat all passengers with identical respect and professionalism. Discrimination based on race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin constituted immediate grounds for termination and potential federal civil rights violations carrying substantial penalties. Tonight, those regulations faced their ultimate test. Patricia's years of unchecked discrimination were about to collide with federal oversight in ways she never imagined possible. As Jonathan approached her counter, passport and boarding pass in hand, he maintained his characteristic calm professionalism. His extensive training had prepared him for moments exactly like this. He observed her body language as he drew near, the slight tightening of her jaw, the narrowing of her eyes, the way her posture shifted from relaxed to hostile. "Good evening," Jonathan said politely, placing his documents on the counter. "Jonathan Hayes, first class to Washington Dulles." Patricia's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile as she glanced at his boarding pass without picking it up. Her eyes swept over him from head to toe, taking in his expensive suit, his leather briefcase, his polished shoes, all the markers of professional success that should have commanded respect. Instead, her face contorted with open contempt. Part 3: The Trash Bin. "Oh, why do they always send these ghetto people to my gate?" Patricia's disgusted voice echoed across gate C-24. "Go back where you came from." The blonde gate agent stood behind her United Airlines counter, her face twisted with unveiled hatred. Jonathan stood perfectly still, his expression neutral, his hands visible. Years of experience had taught him that any reaction, any display of emotion, could be weaponized against him. Patricia grabbed his documents and, in a gesture so shocking that several passengers gasped audibly, threw his passport directly into the trash bin. The metallic clang of the document hitting the bottom echoed through the sudden silence that had fallen over the gate area. She then pulled out hand sanitizer, squirted it dramatically on her hands, and made exaggerated gagging motions as if his presence made her physically sick. "Don't breathe on me," she hissed loudly enough for dozens of passengers to hear. "Security, remove this vagrant from my gate immediately." The entire waiting area fell silent. Business travelers looked up from their laptops. Parents pulled their children closer. An elderly couple exchanged horrified glances. The harsh fluorescent lighting seemed to grow brighter, more exposing, as all eyes turned toward the unfolding confrontation. Jonathan remained perfectly calm, though his passport sat buried in garbage. His voice, when he spoke, carried quiet authority. "Excuse me, that's my passport. I need that document to board my flight." Patricia's lips curled into a satisfied smirk as she crossed her arms and leaned back in her ergonomic chair. "Oh, you need it," she mocked, her voice rising to ensure nearby passengers could hear every word. "Well, Maybe next time you should bring real documentation instead of whatever pathetic fake garbage you people try to pass off as legitimate. The smell of her overpowering perfume mixed with the antiseptic airport air as she stood and moved closer to the counter. Her name tag caught the light, Patricia Reynolds, senior gate agent, as she used her height advantage to loom over Jonathan. "Ma'am, that's a valid United States passport issued by the Department of State," Jonathan replied, his tone remaining steady despite the escalating hostility. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor immediately." Patricia's laugh was sharp and theatrical, designed to humiliate. "My supervisor? You actually think my supervisor is going to take the side of some street thug trying to scam his way onto a plane with fake papers?" She gestured dramatically toward the waiting passengers, many of whom were now openly staring at the confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of security threat we're trained to identify. Suspicious individuals attempting to board aircraft with questionable documentation." A middle-aged white woman in the front row pulled out her iPhone and began openly recording the interaction. Her face showed clear disapproval of Patricia's behavior. A Hispanic family with 2 young children looked visibly uncomfortable, the parents whispering to each other while trying to shield their kids from witnessing the discrimination. An elderly black couple in the back row exchanged knowing glances that spoke of decades of experiencing similar treatment. The woman nudged her husband and pointed toward her phone, indicating she too was documenting the incident. Jonathan reached into his leather wallet and withdrew his driver's license, placing it carefully on the counter. "Here's additional identification. As you can see, the photographs match perfectly. The names are identical, and both documents are clearly legitimate government-issued identification." Patricia snatched the license and made an exaggerated performance of examining it. She held it up to the fluorescent light, squinted at it from multiple angles, and compared it to Jonathan's face with theatrical suspicion. "This could easily be fake too," she announced loudly. Part 4: The Escalation. "These days, anyone with a computer can manufacture realistic-looking IDs," Patricia continued, her voice dripping with manufactured authority. "How do I know you didn't just steal some innocent person's identity?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others began reaching for their phones to document the increasingly bizarre interaction. "Because that's completely absurd," Jonathan responded, his professional training preventing any display of frustration. "I'm asking you to retrieve my passport from the trash and process my boarding pass according to standard airline procedures." "Standard procedures?" Patricia's voice took on a mocking tone as she turned to her computer terminal. "Let me just check your so-called confirmed reservation." She began typing with exaggerated dramatic flair, making concerned facial expressions, and shaking her head disapprovingly at whatever she pretended to see on her screen. "Oh, this is very interesting," she announced loud enough for the entire gate area to hear. "The system is showing multiple irregularities with your booking profile." Jonathan knew she was fabricating everything. He had checked in online that morning and received his mobile boarding pass without any issues. "What specific irregularities are you referring to?" "Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss classified security details," Patricia replied smugly. "But let's just say your booking pattern raises several red flags in our fraud detection system. Multiple payment methods, suspicious last-minute changes, questionable travel history. Does any of that ring a bell for you?" None of it was remotely true, and Jonathan recognized the lies for exactly what they were: desperate attempts to justify discriminatory treatment with invented security concerns. The woman recording from the front row cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me, I've been watching this entire interaction from the beginning. This gentleman has been nothing but polite and professional, and you threw his passport in the trash for absolutely no legitimate reason. That's not normal procedure for anyone." Patricia whirled around to face the woman, her face flushing red with anger. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to mind your own business immediately. This is an active security investigation, and civilian interference is completely inappropriate and potentially illegal." "I'm not interfering with anything," the woman replied firmly, continuing to record. "I'm simply documenting what appears to be blatant racial discrimination happening in real time." "Discrimination?" Patricia's voice rose to near shouting volume. "This has absolutely nothing to do with discrimination. This is about airport security and proper documentation verification procedures. If you continue to disrupt my official investigation, I'll have you removed from this gate area as well." More passengers began pulling out their phones to record. The Hispanic father started filming while positioning himself to shield his children from the escalating confrontation. The elderly black man nodded to his wife, who also began capturing video evidence. Jonathan stood perfectly still, his hands clearly visible at his sides, his posture completely non-threatening. Years of experience as a black man navigating institutional racism had taught him that any sudden movement, any raised voice, any display of frustration could be weaponized against him. "I'm going to ask one final time," he said quietly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Please return my passport and process my boarding pass according to standard federal aviation regulations." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "And I'm going to tell you one final time, you are not boarding this aircraft. You are not getting your fake passport back. And in exactly 2 minutes, you're going to be explaining your pathetic little scam to federal security agents." She grabbed her desk phone and dialed airport security with theatrical urgency. Part 5 Security arrives. "This is Patricia Reynolds at Gate C-24, she announced dramatically into the phone. "I need immediate assistance with a passenger presenting fraudulent documents and exhibiting increasingly aggressive behavior toward airline personnel." She paused, listening to the response while maintaining hostile eye contact with Jonathan. "Yes, he appears to be attempting to board with completely fake identification. No, he's absolutely refusing to leave the gate area voluntarily." The antiseptic smell of airport cleaning solution mixed with Patricia's overwhelming perfume as she continued her fabricated report. "Please send multiple officers immediately. I'm genuinely concerned about passenger safety at this point." Within 3 minutes, Officers Martinez and Thompson arrived at the gate, their heavy boots clicking against the polished floor. Their radios crackled with static as they assessed the scene. A calm black man standing professionally at the counter, a visibly agitated gate agent, and dozens of passengers with phones recording everything. Officer Martinez, a 15-year airport security veteran, immediately noticed the disconnect between Patricia's urgent report and the actual situation before him. "Ma'am, what exactly seems to be the problem here?" Martinez asked Patricia, his tone professionally neutral. Patricia launched into her fabricated account with renewed confidence, emboldened by the arrival of uniformed authority. This individual presented completely fraudulent travel documents and became increasingly hostile and threatening when I questioned their authenticity according to proper security protocols. She gestured dramatically toward Jonathan. "He's been making veiled threats against airline personnel and disrupting normal gate operations. I believe he may be attempting some kind of elaborate scam or worse." "That's completely and demonstrably false," Jonathan interjected calmly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "I presented valid federal identification, which she immediately threw in the trash without examination, and I've remained completely professional throughout this entire interaction." Officer Thompson, younger and less experienced than his partner, immediately focused his attention on Jonathan with obvious suspicion. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification right away." My identification is currently in that trash bin, Jonathan replied evenly, gesturing toward the waste basket beside Patricia's desk. She disposed of my valid United States passport and has refused to return it despite multiple polite requests. He's absolutely lying, Patricia shrieked, her voice echoing throughout the gate area. I properly disposed of fraudulent documents according to established security protocols. This man is trying to manipulate the situation and play the victim. Martinez looked skeptical as he examined the trash bin. Ma'am, standard procedure would be to confiscate and secure suspicious documents for investigation, not dispose of them entirely. Can you show me these allegedly fraudulent documents? Patricia's confidence flickered momentarily. Well, they were so obviously fake that I disposed of them according to proper protocol. You threw away potential federal evidence? Martinez asked, his tone becoming more professionally concerned and less supportive of Patricia's version of events. Look, the important point here is that this individual clearly doesn't belong on this flight, Patricia said, her voice rising again as she gestured wildly. I have 8 years of professional experience in aviation security. I absolutely know a suspicious individual when I see one. She turned to face the growing crowd of passengers, many now openly recording with their smartphones. Everyone needs to step back immediately and stop filming. This is an active federal security investigation, and civilian interference is completely illegal. The woman who had been recording from the beginning spoke up firmly. We have every legal right to document what's happening in a public space, especially when we're witnessing what appears to be obvious racial discrimination. Discrimination, Patricia's voice reached a near shriek. This has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with race. This is purely about airport security protocols and proper documentation verification procedures. Officer Thompson stepped closer to Jonathan, his hand moving instinctively toward his handcuffs. The situation was spiraling beyond simple discrimination into something far more dangerous. Part 6, The False Report. Sir, I'm going to need you to place your hands where I can clearly see them and step away from the counter area immediately, Thompson ordered, his young face set with manufactured authority. Officer, I'm fully complying with all reasonable requests, Jonathan responded calmly, raising his hand slightly to shoulder level. But I want to ensure you understand exactly what's actually happening here before taking any irreversible actions. What's happening, Patricia interjected loudly, is that this individual attempted to board a commercial aircraft using fraudulent federal documents, became increasingly belligerent when properly questioned about their authenticity, and is now trying to claim victim status to avoid federal prosecution. She pulled out her personal iPhone and began recording Jonathan directly. I'm documenting this interaction for my own legal protection and for official airline security purposes. This individual has displayed aggressive and threatening behavior throughout this entire encounter. The harsh lighting reflected off her phone screen as she moved closer, deliberately invading Jonathan's personal space while filming. Say something threatening now, she taunted quietly, her voice just loud enough for the phone's microphone to capture. Go ahead, show everyone your true nature. Martinez watched Patricia's unprofessional behavior with growing alarm. In his extensive experience, legitimate security concerns didn't typically involve gate agents recording passengers on personal devices or making dramatic public declarations. Ma'am, please stop recording and walk me through exactly what happened, step by step, Martinez requested firmly. I already explained everything clearly, Patricia snapped, whirling to face him. Why aren't you arresting him immediately? Why are you questioning me instead of dealing with this obvious security threat? I'm the victim here. Officer Thompson had moved to a flanking position beside Jonathan, his hand now resting openly on his handcuffs. Sir, We're going to need to conduct a thorough search to ensure you're not carrying any weapons or contraband materials. Officer, I'm not carrying any weapons of any kind, Jonathan replied steadily. I'm a business traveler with completely standard personal items, but if you feel a search is absolutely necessary for everyone's safety, I'll fully comply. Patricia seized on this development like a predator sensing weakness. Yes, search him thoroughly, check everything. I absolutely guarantee you'll find something suspicious. These people always have something illegal to hide. Several passengers audibly gasped at the openly discriminatory language. The woman recording called out loudly, "Did everyone hear that? These people. This is pure, undisguised racism." "It's not racism," Patricia screamed, completely losing any pretense of professionalism. "It's security. It's protecting innocent, legitimate passengers from dangerous individuals who clearly don't belong in civilized society." She grabbed her desk phone again with shaking hands. "I'm calling Denver police right now. Airport security obviously isn't taking this terrorist threat seriously enough. We need real law enforcement for this level of danger." Martinez held up his hand firmly. "Ma'am, please do not call additional agencies. We are handling this situation appropriately." "You're not handling anything," Patricia shouted, spit flying from her lips. "This man is clearly a major security risk, and you're letting him manipulate you with false claims of so-called discrimination." She began dialing anyway, her fingers stabbing at the numbers. "Denver Police Emergency Line. This is Patricia Reynolds at Denver International Airport, Gate C-24. I need immediate assistance with a potential terrorist threat situation." The crowd of passengers erupted in shocked murmurs and angry protests. Several people called out, "That's completely untrue. We all saw what really happened." Yes, an individual attempted to board a commercial aircraft with obviously fraudulent documents and has become increasingly aggressive and threatening, Patricia continued into the phone. "He appears to be Middle Eastern or," she looked directly at Jonathan with undisguised hatred, "well, he's definitely not American. Please send multiple patrol units immediately." The absurdity and racism of her false report hung in the air like toxic smoke. Jonathan maintained his calm exterior, but internally recognized that the situation had escalated far beyond simple discrimination into potentially life-threatening territory. False terrorism accusations could result in federal charges, indefinite detention, and serious physical danger. It was time to end this before someone got hurt. Part 7. The Revelation. Jonathan slowly reached into his jacket pocket, ensuring every movement was deliberately visible to both security officers. The fluorescent terminal lighting caught the metallic gleam of his federal credentials as he withdrew them from his inner pocket. "Officers, before this situation escalates any further, I need to show you something extremely important," he announced clearly, his voice carrying new authority that cut through the chaos. He opened his leather credentials wallet, revealing both his official photograph and the unmistakable federal badge inside. The gold eagle seal caught the harsh airport lighting as he held it at eye level for both officers to examine. "I am Senior Safety Inspector Jonathan Hayes with the Federal Aviation Administration," he stated calmly, his professional demeanor now taking on unmistakable governmental authority. "I am currently conducting an unannounced federal compliance review of passenger processing procedures at this facility." Officer Martinez stepped closer to examine the credentials, his experienced eye immediately recognizing their authentic federal formatting, holographic security features, and official government seals. "Sir, these credentials appear completely legitimate," Martinez confirmed, his tone shifting to one of professional respect as he studied the identification thoroughly. Officer Thompson looked confused and uncertain, glancing rapidly between Jonathan's official federal identification and Patricia, whose face had suddenly drained of all color like water flowing from a broken dam. "That is absolutely correct," Jonathan continued, his voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of federal law enforcement authority. "For the past 25 minutes, I have been systematically documenting discriminatory behavior and multiple federal civil rights violations occurring at this gate." He reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew official FAA inspection paperwork bearing government letterhead and official seals. "This is my federal inspection authorization, personally signed by the regional administrator. I possess full federal authority to investigate compliance with anti-discrimination regulations in commercial aviation." The crisp sound of official documents being unfolded echoed through the suddenly silent gate area as passengers strained to understand the dramatic reversal unfolding before them. Patricia stared at the federal documents, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. The full magnitude of her catastrophic mistake was beginning to register in her consciousness. "Ma'am," Jonathan addressed Patricia directly, his voice now carrying the weight of federal authority, "you have just committed multiple serious federal violations in the presence of 2 sworn law enforcement officers and dozens of civilian witnesses." His calm professionalism remained intact, but there was steel beneath his words. "Your actions tonight constitute racial discrimination under federal civil rights law, filing false reports to law enforcement agencies, willful destruction of federal identification documents, and deliberate interference with an official federal investigation." He turned to Officer Martinez with clear expectation of immediate compliance. "Officer, I need you to immediately secure that trash bin containing my passport as federal evidence. I also require you to preserve all video footage from the gate area security camera system." Martinez nodded with instant professional deference. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, Inspector Hayes." He immediately moved toward evidence preservation. "Ma'am," Martinez addressed Patricia with newfound authority, "I need you to retrieve that passport from the trash bin immediately and handle it as federal evidence." Patricia's hands trembled violently as she reached into the waste basket. Her earlier aggressive confidence had completely evaporated like morning mist. I didn't realize. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding." "No, ma'am. This is definitively not a misunderstanding of any kind," Jonathan replied with quiet but unmistakable firmness. "This represents a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior that I have been specifically investigating across multiple airport facilities nationwide." He produced a small digital recording device from his pocket. "I have also been recording this entire interaction as part of my official federal investigation. Your explicit statements about these people and your completely fabricated terrorism accusations are all permanently documented as federal evidence." The crowd of passengers erupted in murmurs of amazement, satisfaction, and vindication. The woman who had been recording from the beginning called out triumphantly, "I knew something was seriously wrong. Thank you for exposing this racism." Part 8, Justice Served. Within minutes of Jonathan's identity revelation, Gate C-24 transformed into a corporate crisis management center. United Airlines executives materialized as if summoned by emergency protocols, their faces displaying the particular strain of realizing their company faced a federal discrimination investigation that would soon explode across social media. "Inspector Hayes," station manager David Walsh approached with visible anxiety, his company tie askew from hurried movement. "We are implementing immediate corrective actions. Miss Reynolds has been suspended without pay, pending a comprehensive investigation into her conduct." 2 additional security officers flanked Patricia as her company badge, access keys, and airport credentials were systematically confiscated. Her face had transformed from earlier smugness to complete devastation as reality crystallized. 8 years of employment, pension benefits, health care coverage, all potentially destroyed by 25 minutes of discriminatory behavior she assumed would go unchallenged. "This is my entire livelihood," Patricia pleaded desperately to Supervisor Carter, her voice cracking with panic. "I have mortgage payments, car loans, credit card debt. I made a terrible mistake, but surely everyone deserves a second chance." "Ma'am, you did not make a mistake of any kind," Jonathan interjected with calm federal authority. "You made a deliberate series of discriminatory choices to intimidate, humiliate, and file false reports against a passenger based solely on his race. These were not errors in judgment. They constitute violations of federal law." United Airlines legal counsel Sandra Morrison had arrived breathlessly, rapidly taking notes while speaking in hushed, urgent tones with executives. The company's liability exposure was mounting exponentially, particularly with multiple passenger videos already being uploaded to social media platforms, with hashtags trending toward viral status. "Inspector Hayes," Morrison approached cautiously, "United Airlines commits to complete cooperation with your federal investigation. We're prepared to implement immediate remedial measures and provide unrestricted access to personnel records and training documentation." Within 48 hours, video footage from Gate C-24 had exploded across every major social media platform, accumulating over 15 million views and generating hundreds of thousands of shares. The hashtag Patricia Gate agent dominated trending topics nationally as news outlets recognized the story's explosive potential. The Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General launched an immediate comprehensive investigation, dispatching a full team of federal investigators to Denver International Airport. Inspector General Michelle Rodriguez announced at a packed press conference, "This incident represents not merely individual misconduct, but potentially systematic failures in civil rights enforcement throughout the commercial aviation industry." Patricia's trial became a landmark federal case in civil rights enforcement. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of discriminatory intent, including testimony from multiple previous passengers who had experienced identical treatment from Patricia over several years. "She consistently referred to passengers of color as these people," testified Maria Gonzalez, a Latina passenger who had been subjected to Patricia's discrimination 8 months earlier. "She made me feel like I didn't belong in America, much less in an airport." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding Patricia guilty on multiple federal charges: civil rights violations under federal law, filing false police reports, and willful destruction of federal identification documents. Judge Sarah Williams sentenced Patricia to 18 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised probation, her gavel echoing through the packed courtroom. "Miss Reynolds," Judge Williams stated during sentencing, her words recorded for legal precedent, "your actions represented not merely personal bias, but a calculated abuse of governmental authority that fundamentally undermined public trust in our aviation security system. Federal employees and contractors bear heightened responsibility to uphold civil rights, and your violations were particularly egregious and systematic." The systematic changes extended far beyond Patricia's individual punishment. The FAA implemented comprehensive new mandatory reporting requirements for discrimination incidents. Airlines were required to maintain detailed records of all passenger complaints and demonstrate proactive measures to prevent discriminatory bias. 6 months after that evening at Gate C-24, Jonathan Hayes stood before the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., delivering a keynote address on civil rights enforcement. The audience included federal officials and advocates who had followed his case since the viral video first exploded across social media. "When I approached Patricia Reynolds's counter that night," Jonathan reflected, "I was conducting a routine compliance inspection. I never imagined becoming the subject of the very discrimination I was investigating." He paused, scanning the engaged faces before him. "That experience taught me something crucial about bias in America. Discrimination doesn't pause when you show credentials. It doesn't stop when you prove your qualifications. It affects people of color regardless of education, position, or authority." Changes since his case had been substantial and measurable. Airlines reported 65% fewer discrimination complaints. Passenger surveys showed increased confidence among travelers of color in receiving fair treatment. The most significant outcome wasn't Patricia Reynolds serving prison time, Jonathan continued. It was thousands of airport personnel receiving enhanced bias training, new reporting systems making it easier to document discrimination, federal oversight ensuring accountability. He looked directly into cameras broadcasting nationwide. "But we cannot mistake progress for completion. Discrimination is adaptive. When we close one avenue, it finds another. Our vigilance must be constant." To the passengers who had recorded the original incident, Jonathan said directly, "You demonstrated that in the digital age, discrimination cannot hide in plain sight. Your courage made accountability possible." Carlos Rivera, the Hispanic father who had defended Jonathan that night, later told reporters, "I teach my children that when you see something wrong, you speak up." That night showed them that standing up for others makes a real difference. Change is possible, Jonathan concluded, but it requires personal responsibility. When you witness discrimination, document it. When you see injustice, speak up. When you have the power to create change, use it. He posed his final challenge. Next time you witness someone treated unfairly because of race, religion, or background, ask yourself, what will you do? Will you look away, or will you remember Gate C-24 and choose to act? The applause was sustained and heartfelt. The story of Gate C-24 had proven that individual courage combined with systematic accountability could create change that protected everyone's civil rights. Because discrimination thrives in silence but dies in the light of truth and accountability. And on that October evening in Denver, truth had won. The end.